Hello and welcome. Today we're going to do a tour of Bruges, or Brugge in Dutch. Bruges is one of the most popular tourist destinations in Belgium and it's always very crowded. Maybe too crowded, but that's a discussion for another day. In this video we're not going to go on any boat rides or visit museums about fries or chocolate, but visit a few places linked to medieval Burgundian history. I have tried to create some kind of tour, even though it's probably not possible to do all of this in one day. I am going to start the tour at the station, as for us and most people I guess, going by train is a good option, avoiding traffic jams and parking problems. The city centre is within walking distance, about 1.5 kilometers to the market square. The centre of the city is almost completely surrounded by water. A few of the medieval city gates are still left. They're not part of this video, but here is where they are located on the map. The first thing you'll encounter walking from the station to the center of the town is the Beguinage and the famous Meadow. I usually avoid this area because it's always so busy there, but here are some pictures of it. The first site we'll visit is the St. John's Hospital, a medieval hospital. The institution dates from around 1150 and is one of the oldest of continental Europe. Over the centuries, the buildings were continually extended, rebuilt and renovated. The hospital ward dates from around 1200. Nowadays, it houses a museum. One part of the museum focuses on the history of the hospital itself, showing some medical instruments and other objects. Another part of the museum focuses on medieval art and in particular paintings by Hans Memling. Do not forget to have a look at the attic and its impressive ceiling. We leave the hospital behind and go on to St. Salvators Cathedral. Originally, this Romanesque building was not a cathedral. It only became one in the 19th century after the St. Donatian Cathedral had disappeared. The origins of this church date back to the 12th century. As with many medieval buildings, it has undergone many changes, such as a Gothic extension. There were also some changes and additions when the church became a cathedral. Inside this church you can see a few artworks relating to the Burgundian era. One of them is a triptych of Saint Hippolyte, started by Dirk Bouts and after his death completed by Hugo van der Goest. The painting was commissioned by Hippolyte de Berthoz and his wife Elizabeth. Hippolyte was born in Poligny, Burgundy, but ended up in Bruges, where he worked in a position dealing with the finances and accounts of Duke Charles the Bold. Above the choir stalls you can see the panels of the chapter of the Golden Fleece, which was held here in 1478, the year after Charles the Bold died. From this church we walk on towards the Duke's Palace. This is now a hotel, but in the 15th century this is where the Ducal Palace was located. Nowadays not much is left of the old Prinsenhof. On an old map you can see how large the complex was, and this was even after the Burgundian era. Located nearby is another hotel named Karel de Stoute. Karel de Stoute is the Flemish name for Charles the Bold. The building was the Hotel Charolais, which was built in the second half of the 15th century for young Charles the Bold inside the premises of the Ducal Palace. Our next destination is St. Jacob's, an early Gothic brick church. The Dukes of Burgundy, such as Philip and Charles, went to this church when they were in Bruges, but also important courtiers such as Peter Bladelin and Tommaso Portinari, the representative of the Medici Bank in Bruges. Next we can take a look at the Platelinhof. This was a city palace built by Peter Bladelin, councillor of Duke Philip the Good and treasurer of the Order of the Golden Fleece. Peter built a whole new city outside Bruges and moved there. He sold his townhouse to the Medici family, who sold it to Tommaso Portinari, the Bruges agent of their bank. Tommaso's story deserves a video of its own, so I'm not going to elaborate about him here. Suffice to say, he had to return to Italy, and the house came into the hands of several new owners over the centuries. Nowadays the building is a convent. Sometimes it's possible to visit a small portion of this former home of Platal and Portinari, but it has very limited opening hours and I've never been inside. From this location you can do a small detour via the Augustijnerij, where you can see the remains of a tower of the old city wall. In the Karmerstraat, a bit further on, you can have a look at the building of the Archery Guild of Saint Sebastian. Here Anthony of Burgundy, Charles the Bold's half-brother, won an archery contest in 1463. Maybe that's what the arrow in his portrait by Rogier van der Weyde is referring to, though I think the dating doesn't seem to match the portrait, but I could be wrong. Our next destination is the medieval Jerusalem Chapel. The chapel was built in the 15th century by the Adorno family after some members had gone on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. The church is some kind of tribute to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. The Adorno family came from Genoa, Italy, and established themselves in Bruges from the 14th century onwards. The domain is still in the hands of descendants of the original family. They organize art exhibitions in the surrounding buildings twice a year. There's also a small museum, a shop and a lounge. In the chapel itself you can see the tombstone of Anselm Adornes and his Bruges wife Margaretha van der Bank. Anselm was a businessman, politician and diplomat. He participated in the tournaments organized by the Chivalrous Company of the White Bear and was an organizer of the Tournament of the Golden Tree held in July 1468 to celebrate the marriage of Margaret of York and Charles the Bold. Anselm did not live in the domain but near his warehouses near the water. Anselm often went on diplomatic missions to Scotland and got murdered there by a gang in 1483. He was buried in Linlithgow and only his heart was transferred and placed in the tomb in Bruges. From here we head into the heart of the city. It will be very busy, but we go there for a good reason. First we will make a brief stop at the Van Eyck Square. In the wall of the lodge you can see the bear mentioned during the visit of the Adorno's domain. Close by is the medieval toll house. Now we will go to the market square and try not to get run over by one of the horse-drawn carriages. We will not climb the belfry today, it's always too crowded. We go to the Burg, a short walk from here. The town hall is one of the oldest of its kind and was built in 1376. Nearby is the Basilica of the Holy Blood. The upper chapel was rebuilt in the neo-Gothic style and is very colourful. You can see some of the Dukes of Burgundy depicted in the stained glass windows. At certain times of the day, you have the opportunity to queue up and look at a relic of the Holy Blood. Filming was not allowed in here, so here is a quick snap of the leaflet you get when you pass the Holy Blood. The vial was supposedly brought from the Holy Land by Thierry d'Alsace in the 12th century. To be honest, I'm not sure if what I show is a replica or not. When Mary of Burgundy had fallen from her horse and lay dying, the relic was brought to her in the last effort to save her. Do not forget to go to the lower 12th century chapel dedicated to Saint Basil. This chapel is far more authentic and is quite interesting. Close by was the Saint Donation Church. It's now gone and only a bit of the foundations are left. These foundations can be seen in the cellars of a nearby hotel, but it's hard to go there now because of all the tourists and I got a lot of trouble with them. I've never been in there and I must admit, I don't know what I look like. From here we go to the Burgundian Museum. The building itself is not so interesting, but it has a number of famous paintings, including a large triptych by Hans Memling and the famous Canon van der Pala painting by Jan van Eyck. Now it's time to go to the Gruthuysen Museum. The museum is located in the old residence of the Gruthuysen family. The family amassed their fortune with the trade of gruth, a mixture of herbs for beer brewing. The most famous member of the family was Louis of Gruthuysen, also known as Louis of Bruges. He was a diplomat and military man at the court of the Dukes of Burgundy. He was also a member of the Order of the Golden Fleece. Louis had also a very fine library. The oldest part of the building dates back to the 13th century. The building at the waterfront was built around 1425 by the first Lord of Gruthuysen, and the tower has a stairwell. Nowadays, this building is officially a museum of applied arts. The most spectacular bit is the chapel which Louis had built in 1472. The chapel looks down on the choir of the Church of Our Lady and now also on the tombs of Mary of Burgundy and Charles the Bold. Obviously, these tombs were not there when Louis was still alive. From this museum, we walk to the Church of Our Lady. This church is mostly visited by tourists because it has a sculpture by Michelangelo.